Meet Stephen John Assanti, an 800-pound man who got kicked out of the hospital for ordering a pizza, ran a YouTube channel called Fat Boy Get Down, and had his immensely childish behavior broadcast on TLC. Born on December 2nd, 1981, Stephen and his brother Justin grew up under miserable conditions. When his parents went their separate ways, the mother claimed custody of the pair's 2 children. Living with her was pretty much hell. She was an alcoholic and would rather go clubbing with her boyfriends than raise her kids. On the rare occasion she was home, her dates abused them every chance they got. Before leaving, she'd put out food, and Stephen would usually chomp through it before Justin could even react. Eating was basically the only way to cope with the situation. A few years later, their mother would go away and never return again, so the kids went back to their dad, and things should have gotten better, but the damage was already done. They still had voids in their hearts, and the only way to fill it was with food. But Stephen especially had it bad. By the time he reached high school, he weighed 250 pounds. He'd always hide boxes of pizza in his closet, and get into fist fights with his dad constantly. One of these resulted in the police coming over and arresting the father, but Stephen was willing to drop the charges if he got another large pizza. Stephen Sr. gradually lost hope in his son. Then one day, the mother called and offered to take care of him. However, Stephen proved to be difficult for her as well, so he'd end up having to live on his own. His health only got worse as a result of this, now eating up to 6 whole pizzas a day. He'd also discover a new outlet to vent his frustrations: YouTube. Eventually, Stephen got to a point where he couldn't even walk on his own, so he'd have to move back in with his father. But yet again, Stephen Sr. just couldn't control him. The constant pounding on Justin's walls until he got what he wanted scarred him for life. Stephen was sent to various different hospitals, always getting himself kicked out. Soon, not a single clinic in the entire state of Rhode Island would ever let him in. So in comes Dr. Yunan Nowzaradan, aka Dr. Now, an Iranian-born American doctor and TV personality who specializes in vascular and bariatric surgery. Episode 1 of 5 begins after Stephen got kicked out of yet another hospital, complete with the most ominous piano ever. We're in for some deep shit, alright. He promised the staff he'd behave, but following his diet plan was getting far too overwhelming for him. Just when everyone in Rhode Island gave up on Stephen, Dr. Now decided it was his chance to step up. So he invited Justin and Stephen to come over for a checkup. Stephen Sr. explains how his son was large enough to break both the sink and the toilet, which, speaking of the bathroom, he never used it to urinate, only to poop. The man's hygiene was at the bottom of the barrel. Justin, meanwhile, has been thriving now that Stephen's gone, although he's still gaining weight much like his brother, since all of his time is spent playing video games and Monopoly?
Just playing Monopoly or video games.
Justin has seen firsthand what morbid obesity can do, and does not want to go down the same path. With their bags all packed up, the family goes on a road trip to visit Dr. Now in Houston. A medical RV is the only way Stephen can travel, and it takes a whole army of doctors just to get him onto it. While both of the brothers were on their way to get treated, something unexpected wound up causing a delay. A bump broke Stephen's bed, and only a spare tire underneath could fix it. Just their luck, the RV gets a flat tire. Thankfully, they were able to swap it out with some cinder blocks and boards. After chowing down on not 1, but 2 breakfasts by guilt-tripping his dad, Stephen was still hungry for more. The frustration and antics were starting to get to Stephen's father, but eventually he caved in once again. It became a habit for Stephen to ask for food every 2 hours. When his dad joked about the smaller portion sizes he'd soon be getting, Stephen just flipped him off in response. Back in Houston, Dr. Now was getting ready for his biggest challenge yet. As the RV pulled in, he couldn't help but comment about how dysfunctional the family was. Stepping inside, the first thing Dr. Now got to hear was a plea for painkillers. Since he knew a thing or two about dealing with these types of people, Dr. Now decided to change the subject to how they were going to get Stephen out of the RV. Surprisingly enough, Stephen was pretty excited to turn over a new leaf, even held in his pee the entire trip. The team somehow managed to drag him inside, while the patient kept bugging them for something to take the pain off. Dr. Now knows what's happening, but decides to let things slide for now. This was Steven getting exactly what he wants, and Justin was the only one calling him out for it from the start. Speaking of Justin, he was outside waiting in the car, suffering from pain of his own. He'd much rather be in a hotel at the moment, but something was up with his leg. With signs of a murmur in his heart, Justin gets a quick checkup, while the doc's left to wonder what's wrong with the Assanti brothers and what he can do to fix things. Meanwhile, the nursing staff finally gives Steven a long-awaited shower. In his own room, Justin lets his dad and some of the staff know that he's just about ready to call it quits and head home. His dad informs the doctor of this, but things just can't end this way for his ailing son. Even though Justin gave Dr. Now the cold shoulder, he wasn't going to get his way that easy. After asking him to take a few tests before he leaves, Dr. Now and Justin's dad shake on it. Despite making the long trip, Justin's ready to give up, but an unwelcome visitor decided to try and change his mind, although it's for all the wrong reasons. Scared of being alone, Steven tried to coerce his brother into staying, but Justin wants nothing to do with him. The next day, Steven gets a team of nurses to personally check up on him. He gets on a scale, and they find out he's actually 730 pounds. That's more than 3 times the average overweight male. Dr. Now keeps his cool and tells Steven the goal is to drop him down to 250. But before that, he must get on a controlled diet, consisting of 1,000 calories a day, high protein, no carbs, and absolutely no pizza. Despite all the smiles, Dr. Now knows Steven's Boy Scout routine is eventually going to end, and they'll wind up seeing the real monster hiding underneath. Back in his room, while proudly calling himself a fast food junkie, Steven let the viewers at home know he was itching for a burger right now. He was even hoping his father would order a going away dinner. Then Steven tries again to convince Justin to stay longer, but he does not budge. Justin just found out there's nothing serious going on with him, and even though Dr. Now offered him weight loss surgery, it's the last thing on his mind. Before the family finally hits the road again, Justin gets a weigh-in and a swift reality check right after. Dr. Now tells Justin if he doesn't want to end up like his brother, he needs to make some major life changes. The news was devastating for Steven, who was grappling with the thought of being left alone to his own devices. With a tearful hug and some casual guilt tripping, Steven says goodbye and prepares for the worst. Predictably, his mask is beginning to slip. A month in, he's already treating the nurses like room service. Even though they're helping him, Steven's complaining about them being busy with other patients. Eventually, the staff starts getting on Steven's nerves, and the feelings are pretty mutual at this point. Begging for painkillers yet again, Steven keeps calling the nurses into his room any chance he gets. It's clear Steven hasn't been on his best behavior. Dr. Now even goes so far as to call him a child, before he walks in and gives a very stern warning. Steven very briefly counts his blessings, then goes right back to his old ways, calling nurses over to his room every 10 minutes for the dumbest reasons. Eventually, they decide to cut him off. The option to call them was taken away from him, but that didn't stop him from grabbing another phone and doing it all over again. It's an absolute nightmare for the nurses, and Dr. Now is tired of it. With a few stern words, Steven is evicted from the hospital, finally putting an end to the nurses' torture. A tough call indeed, but the staff would have rather left him homeless than dealt with him another night. Back in Rhode Island, Justin continues to delude himself and avoids fixing up his life. In the kitchen, Steven's dad gets the unfortunate news, and he's not too thrilled. His only remaining option is to rent out an apartment for his son. Justin, meanwhile, is not surprised in the slightest. The next day, Steven sees his dad and tells him he's basically on a food strike. He gives Dr. Now the same sob story in the hopes that he'd get his way, but Dr. Now is not having it. With one final weigh-in before they send him off, the doctor learns Steven lost 100 pounds during his stay. The next step is to get his attitude adjusted and have him lose 60 more pounds to prepare for surgery. Even though the doctor knows nothing's gonna change, he's still trying to stay optimistic. After settling into his new place, Steven's first priority is to try the local pizzeria. Knowing full well he couldn't win this argument, Steven's dad caved in. But when he asked Steven to share a slice from the pizza he paid for inside the apartment that he was renting, all he got was a rude gesture. Despite knowing his dad hadn't eaten all day, Steven kept up the mind games for his own amusement. After getting treated like shit yet again, Steven's dad knew it was time to leave. 1 month in, Steven's been enjoying the freedom. He even got himself a personal assistant to bathe and feed him. So what's there to complain about? Let's just say the nurse didn't quite feel the same way about him. All in all, it actually looked like Steven was on his way to earning surgery. However, the calls he made to his father tell a different story. Justin's recordings show the threats he made to his father to get him to buy more food. He was prepared to eat his nearly bankrupt father out of a home. What's worse was that he was flaking out on his checkups and not answering Dr. Now's calls. Satisfied with squandering his last opportunity, Steven left it to those around him to deal with his tantrums. When his nurse tried to check up on him, Steven was nowhere to be found. The only clue left behind was an empty bottle of painkillers, which would have been strong enough to knock out an entire elephant. Steven was visiting local ERs looking for pills. He wasn't even accepting psychiatric help. Eventually, Dr. Now decided to step in again and pay Steven a visit. Now balding from the top from literally pulling his own hair out, Steven had nothing positive to say about his recovery. It was clear tough love from Dr. Now wasn't going anywhere, so this time the threat was real. Either Steven Assanti gets his act together, or he's dropped from the program entirely. It was devastating to watch, but there was still hope for Steven to get better. The following week, while Justin was busy doing almost nothing to change, he gives us a glimpse into what life's been like for the past few months. A slew of crazy calls to his father asking for pizza, bringing Steven even closer to his eventual death. He gets his way every time, since Steven Sr. just wants his son to get off the pills. But even when he got the pizzas, Steven could not stop popping the beans. Eventually, Justin got sick of his father's enabling behavior, but calling out his dad was not gonna change anything. Steven took everything for granted, and even from thousands of miles away, Justin could tell his brother learned nothing. Anxious on his way to Dr. Now's, Steven was unsure if he'd make the cut or not. Wheeled in to have his weight checked, Steven was left with disappointment. He could lie as much as he wants, but the scales cannot. Steven is back to weighing over 700 pounds. Against all odds, Dr. Now proved he still had a heart and gave Steven yet another chance to shape up. Steven decided this was the perfect time to ask for more pills, and Dr. Now did not find it funny. With the doctor out of sight, the crocodile tears stopped flowing, and Steven's real self started showing. Already he was smiling thinking about his next meal. That same night, Steven got carted back to the hospital for what he claimed to be a pain in his leg. Unable to describe how it felt, it was clear he was just begging for another hit. Even his personal nurse knew it was bullshit. Clearly trying to self-sabotage himself, Steven was at the end of his rope, and so was Dr. Now. The only thing left for him to do was suspend Steven from the weight loss program. Instead, he'll be getting treatment for his drug addiction, since that's more likely to kill him than the weight at this point. His days of gaming the system for meds were finally coming to an end. You can't be fight! 6 months since the first day he met Dr. Now, Steven finds himself being driven to rehab. He knows his addiction is risky, and that he needs all the help he can get to overcome it. While being brought in on a wheelchair, he stops the cart of shame for a quick little selfie. Once inside, he's welcomed by a brand new doctor. Steven introduced himself to Dr. Flowers, and shared his medical history with his team of physicians. He had been hooked on painkillers for 8 years, beginning when he was first admitted to the hospital for gallbladder surgery. This was Steven's moment to come clean, and he did not hesitate to lay it all out. The conversation went well, up until Steven was asked about his depression. Even though Steven denied his struggles with mental health, the rehab team decided it'd be best to address his psychological issues first. Steven was about to go through the journey of a lifetime. The doctors insisted on taking away his access to technology and the internet. That way they could bring Steven back into the real world. Despite how scary everything was, Steven agreed. A detox and therapy were two things he desperately needed. After a quick call with his dad and a breakdown, Steven decided it was time to make a change. Even though the withdrawals hit hard, Steven kept on a straight face. His first day in rehab had not much going on other than him giving a room tour, but the next had Steven complaining about the staff constantly entering his room. The medication to stop his symptoms was working though. Meanwhile, Justin feels like his life is turning around. He even thought about starting his own hobby shop with his father. Unfortunately, he still wasn't quite ready to stick to Dr. Now's diet. Defying authority seems to be a family trait, since now Steven's begging for drugs again. 4 days in, he already wants his daddy to take him home. For once, Steven Sr. says no. However, just 3 days later, he's done with the program and ready to go back to his messy apartment. We learned that before he went to rehab, Steven adopted a cat. Does this look like someone who should be taking care of an animal? While his caregiver Princess was out shopping for withdrawal meds, Steven found out he's short of cash. Returning to his abusive ways, Steven demanded money from his father. He started blaming the people who cared about him on a potential death from relapse. It's been 7 months, and he's made zero progress. He's still thinking about the drugs, and even though Princess was about to quit because of his attitude, he was more worried about himself. On her last visit, Princess shared how Steven was basically overdosing on the rehab medicine. His behavior was worse than ever, and so was his diet. When Princess was about to take his TV back, since her medical company loaned it to him, Steven did something absolutely despicable. Call the cops and blatantly lie to them. He plotted to have Princess arrested over a TV. At this point, there was almost no way to redeem Steven. Princess was the only person in Houston who genuinely cared for him. Despite the way she was treated, Princess knew this was all an act to keep her in his life longer. Unfortunately for Steven, he can't always get his way, especially if this is how he treats people. Realizing how wrong he was too little too late, Steven called the police back to tell them not to come over. Princess had no confidence in him and was ready to leave instead of watching him die. 8 months in and Steven's still acting like a child. He was rushed back to the hospital for, again, leg pain. While crying uncontrollably in front of Dr. Now, Steven got another shot of painkillers. Unsure of whether or not he was lying, Dr. Now decided to monitor him better. A few tests were conducted on his leg, then he got on the scale. 800 pounds. A full 100 pounds over what he started the program with. Steven was ashamed. Dr. Now came in and laid out the facts. Not only did Steven regress further than anyone could have expected, his body had already started giving up on him. Putting all the blame on Princess, Steven was asked by Dr. Now to start taking accountability for once. With no way to back out, Dr. Now decided to put Steven on another controlled diet and schedule him for another round of rehab. On a more positive note, the other Assanti brother finally opened his store and made some new friends. With his social life better than ever, Justin showed he was ready to turn his life around. It's now been 9 months since Steven came to Houston. Even though he behaved a lot better this time, at least according to himself, he was still about to be sent back home. He thought adhering to his diet and staying on his toes didn't really pay off for him, but the scale had something else to say. He lost 80 pounds yet again, and it only took him a month. Before his departure, Dr. Now told Steven to make sure he starts therapy and loses 40 pounds a month, but none of that is gonna get through Steven's head. Wanting more pills, Steven left the hospital on a sour note, continuing to disappoint Dr. Now. Before anything can change, a therapist must intervene. With his stuff all packed up, he was loaded into a car and sent on his way back to the apartment. Later, Steven was visited by Dr. Paradise. and he tried to look presentable, surprisingly enough, although he still wasn't very confident about any of this working out. Regardless, the therapy session goes well. Steven actually shows glimpses of open-mindedness. A week later, he's feeling happy about his progress. His father also flew in to move him to a cheaper place, and Steven was actually excited to see him again, or so it seemed. The apartment looked and smelled horrible, and Steven's father hated having to clean up after his son. Despite his anger over potentially losing his home, Steven's father still manned up and tried to apologize. However, his words kept hurting Steven more and more, and almost undid all of his emotional progress. He treated his son like shit, and nobody could really blame him for being so angry. 3 days went by and Steven was out searching for a new apartment, until a mishap occurred. While Steven was lying on the ground in tears, his father wondered if the pain was real or not. EMS was called and they quickly realized they couldn't fit him in the ambulance, which Steven didn't take too kindly to. 3 men had to get him to walk to his dad's car, and once he started driving, the abuse only got worse. Once they reached the therapist, Steven refuses to leave the car. He just wants to go to the hospital for his injury. Instead of wasting his time, Dr. Paradise asked Steven to come instead. Paradise noticed how rather than working on himself, Steven finds comfort in using others. In fact, during their conversation, Steven called 911 to get to a hospital. Steven's father reaffirms the fact that his son is lonely and enjoys the attention he gets from people worried about him. When he walks out, he's welcomed by medical professionals surrounding the van. Steven Sr. tells them to leave his son alone because he's only doing this for a recreational high. Despite Steven's protests, his father puts his foot down and threatens to leave him homeless if he decides to go with them. For once, Steven makes the correct choice and gives in. He may have made a spectacle out of everything, but this was a step in the right direction. It took a whole week to find him the right place, all while Justin's business struggled because his dad wasn't there to help. Despite hearing his brother's frustration over the phone, Steven focused on his own needs instead of feeling any guilt. As he watched his aging father set everything up for him, Steven expressed grief over his dad having to leave. A month passes and life in Steven's new place is as chaotic as ever. It's time for his checkup with Dr. Now, but he's unsure about the progress he's made. After stepping on the scale, he realizes he's gained 20 pounds again, and Dr. Now isn't happy. To make matters worse, Steven tried pulling a fast one on the doctor once again, asking for more pain medication in order to work out. When asked if he went to the ER in the past month, he claimed he did so 5 times. Not taking his word for it, Dr. Now pulled out a prescription monitoring sheet, which says Steven got prescribed 39 times from 17 different doctors over the course of the program. After listing down the many pills Steven consumed, Dr. Now told him he lost the privilege to request more. Steven asked if he could leave, but Dr. Now wanted him to look in a mirror and see the damage he's done to his body. Forced to confront his own reflection, Steven was brought to the brink of tears. It may have been harsh, but Dr. Now simply wanted to make a point in order to save Steven's life. With his source for drugs cut off, Steven had no choice but to shape up or give up. The hard look in the mirror made Steven decide to let go of his habits, and the following week he'd dump all his soda in the sink. The day after, Steven actually tries to go out for a brief walk. He has never shown discipline anywhere close to this level. Back home though, Justin's store has not been doing well, so now he wants to go back to Houston and give Dr. Now's program another chance. After reaching out to the doctor on a video call, Justin knew it was time to confront his demons. He was asked to lose 30 pounds a month in order to get the surgery, as well as start attending therapy. 2 months go by and Steven's seeing Dr. Now again. He's had 0 pain meds and is actually sticking to his diet. Steven was very nervous stepping on the scale, but his efforts paid off, because he lost more than 70 pounds on his own. For once, Dr. Now is proud of him. He tells Steven that if he keeps it up, he'll be eligible for surgery. Steven walked out confident that he could lose another 40 pounds to continue his recovery. At home, he even acknowledges the harm he caused to Justin and calls him up to try to reconcile. He gives his brother some motivational words, and Justin, although skeptical, is willing to forgive him if he doesn't fall behind. We'll see how long this positivity lasts. 1 month after his emotional call, Steven seems like he's gotten better at taking care of himself, now doing chores and cleaning up after his pet. He's not used to doing these basic tasks, and his weight is only making them harder. Even showering is a challenge for him, but what matters is that he's not rotting away doing nothing. However, because he's off the painkillers, he's been feeling bouts of discomfort again, so instead of drugs, Steven's been relying on junk food to cope. A month later, he's missed an appointment with Dr. Now and is back at the hospital for his pain. Even though Dr. Now demanded he stop abusing the system, Steven told him he needed a refill. After the workers explained how they couldn't take Steven back to his apartment since doing so would violate their protocol, the doctor was livid. He angrily told Steven that they were going to cancel his insurance, but he barely reacted. He didn't even get a weigh-in. Dr. Now said he should just buy his own scale. With no ambulance authorized to take him back, Steven threatened to tell the news media about everything. Dr. Now walks back in and informs him he'll go to jail if he creates a ruckus. He calls Steven on his bluff and lets him know that he too is about to call the press and let them know of his manipulation. Stranded at the hospital, Steven started realizing the errors of his ways. Dr. Now made sure of that so he could teach Steven a lesson. However, Steven still had one outlet he could abuse to get his way: his father. Steven Sr. is pressured into getting a yellow cab for his son, but once it arrives, he struggles to fit in the vehicle. Left to wander outside the hospital, Steven felt completely hopeless. What do you know? All those signs of improvement were a complete facade. On the opposite end of the spectrum, Justin's been serious about getting his act together. He started exercising at home, even though it was difficult for someone his size. Also, he's been sticking to his diet, going so far as to cut out all snacks and only eat 3 meals a day. Even though he slipped in cheat meals at dinner time, he was committed to accomplishing his goals. His main one being to qualify for surgery before Steven, because he feels his brother doesn't deserve it. However, he still needs someone to run his store while he's away in Houston. But regardless, Justin was feeling pretty confident about things to come. The same could not be said for Steven. Even though he kept up with his exercise at least twice a day, he wasn't so sure about his rapport with Dr. Now. Left without a choice, Steven kept eating to cope with his need for a release. Using his brother as a means to motivate himself, Steven kept walking off the meals he was using to cheat on his diet. Another month goes by and the brothers continue to try their best. During another phone call with Dr. Now, Justin let him know how he was adhering to the diet plan. Even though he missed his appointments with the local doctor, Dr. Now offered to weigh Justin himself if he ever winds up coming over. Meanwhile, Steven showed up to the clinic for another visit and a weigh-in. With over 50 pounds gained yet again, Steven's results did not inspire any confidence. Unsurprisingly, the doctor was not too pleased. He's utterly baffled that someone could be this dysfunctional. And this is Dr. Now we're talking about. The man has seen shit. As a last resort, he suggests an operation that would literally prevent Steven from eating on his own short term. This would be his last chance. In just 10 days, his life was about to change completely with a gastric sleeve surgery. After learning of this, Steven Sr. decided he'll fly down to Houston for his son. But before that, he tried to convince Justin to come with him, and it worked. Even though he wasn't exactly exactly excited to see his brother again, he decided to do it for his father. However, in the days leading up to the trip, Justin refused to leave his room. Steven Sr. tried to talk to him through the window, but that didn't work. Eventually, he did cave in and go, although a snowstorm had hit Rhode Island by then. Their plan was to surprise Steven with Justin's arrival and kill two birds with one stone by getting both brothers checked out. On the road, things got difficult after a phone call from Steven made the atmosphere tense. Threatening to skip out on the surgery if his father didn't buy him a sandwich, Steven cursed out his dad and hung up the phone. Justin tried to stop his dad from enabling Steven, but as usual, it did not work out. They arrived exactly the night before his brother's surgery and went over to his apartment to pick him up. Upon seeing his brother, Steven looked like he was about to tear up. This was a huge motivational boost for him, and so they loaded Steven up in the car and the family arrived at the hospital together. Even the mother called them up to wish Steven good luck. This truly is the closest the Assantis have ever gotten to peace, although Justin was a little upset that she didn't actually come over. After saying his goodbyes, Steven received an anti-pep talk from Dr. Now before they knocked him out with the gas. If Steven eats too much, the staples will tear and his body will quite literally bleed out from the inside. This is the scariest thing he's ever done. It's a very high-risk surgery, but there really was no other choice. Dr. Now prepped himself and the procedure began. Working against the clock, the doctors had to complete the procedure before he woke up, since his fragile body couldn't handle anesthesia for too long. They almost lost his spleen when they were removing parts of his stomach, but ultimately the surgery went well and he was sent over to recover. However, even with the anesthesia, Steven asked for pain medication. Still though, he had lost his appetite for several days while being monitored. His family visited him while he was awake, and his father joked about him not being able to eat anything anymore. Steven was happy to see them come, and felt sad when they left. Now hopeful about the future, he wanted to put all of his focus on recovering. The next day, Justin visited Dr. Now to get weighed. Unfortunately, he wound up gaining 40 pounds. Dr. Now wasn't very happy with the results, but he still saw hope in the younger Assanti brother. He let him know that his BMI was scarily close to Steven's, despite not weighing the same right now. If Justin wasn't going to change, his life would be heading towards a deep downward spiral. He needs a bypass surgery ASAP, and losing weight is the only way that could happen. While Justin knew it was best for him, he told Dr. Now that his current responsibilities wouldn't let him get a surgery for the time being. Dr. Now stresses that gastric bypass will let him live to run his business, thus it should be his top priority. Their meeting may have been brief, but it sure left a lasting impact on Justin's psyche. He dreaded the idea of looking like the brother he hated, so he was ready to head back home and change everything about himself. A month passes after Justin's visit, and Steven's already back in his own apartment. He's been struggling with the changes in his body, but at least his appetite has gone away. He felt good about transitioning to a healthier lifestyle despite the pain that came with it. Steven told his dad all he could do was sip water every 15 minutes, and that was all it took to make him full. Oh, speaking of, his dad was pretty supportive, making this one of the least angry phone calls in this entire saga. It's refreshing to see both brothers take their lives seriously now. Justin gets ready to meet with Dr. Now again, but unfortunately Steven has found himself back in the hospital. Unable to eat anything, Steven complained about his condition, only to get shut down by his doctor. Despite their numerous phone calls together, this was the first time he ever said he had issues with the changes. With no amount of leeway granted, Dr. Now told Steven his attempt at getting painkillers was not gonna work. However, he still wondered if Steven developed an ulcer from the years of abusing meds. If there was a problem, they'd rather send a camera down his stomach than offer him anything for his supposed pain. In fact, Dr. Now decided he'd do exactly that and pen Steven down for an endoscopy. It takes 5 times the dose of an average human being to sedate Steven. After having his patient deep-throat a camera, Dr. Now got a clear image of the situation. Turns out everything's fine. If Steven felt pain, it was probably because he was overeating. Another month goes by, and Justin's getting ready to stay in Houston for the next 6 months. At long last, he was finally able to get a friend to look after his store while he's gone. Steven's doing a lot better too. Thanks to the surgery, he lost 92 pounds. An unbelievable milestone for him. Even Dr. Now couldn't help but smile at these new developments. Tasked with losing another 100 pounds for a skin surgery, Steven was left wondering what the next few months had in store for him. 1 year and 7 months after the day he first met Dr. Now, Steven was a changed man. With all the hair on his head shaved off, this new version was able to stand for longer and get a lot more chores done. He was living a happier, more normal life. And even though it had been a long time since the surgery, Steven was still unable to keep anything down. He was consuming his calories in liquid form, since nothing solid was worth eating for him anymore. Steven had completely stopped feeling hungry, and that's something he was okay with. Even Dr. Now felt perplexed by this sudden development. Additionally, Steven was working out at home and going out on walks. He and his brother appeared to be on good terms after a video call. However, when Justin arrived back in Houston, he did not want to visit Steven, causing a fight in the family.
You're not getting my support. I don't give a flying how's that?
You don't think it hurts your feelings when you say like that? I'm gonna tell you right now, I will head right back to the house we live in. I wouldn't give two about your operation because you put yourself in this position. You choose to be fat. All right?
So only Steven Sr. came to visit his son, whom he was legitimately proud of. Obviously not for his fit though, he looks like a Friday Night Funkin' reject. Whereas Justin had gained 4 pounds, Steven lost a whopping 95, and was the thinnest he had ever been since high school. The doctor was satisfied with Steven's progress, but now his next tasks were to improve his hygiene and go back to therapy. Also, Dr. Now is still cautiously optimistic, given Steven's history. A couple days later, Justin and his father stop by Steven's apartment, but he's hesitant to answer the door.
John, just let me in.
His cat has been getting sick lately, so Steven Sr. took him to the vet and found out he was being fed pizza instead of cat food. So Steven Sr. had to run to the store and get some. It's clear that his son still has a long way to go. Steven gave his little brother a pep talk and offered some pretty sound advice. He kept emphasizing the fact that he loved Justin and was genuinely worried about him. The meeting was civil and successfully convinced Justin to stay in Houston longer. Steven was taking his progress very seriously, consistently showing up for his therapy sessions. He shared deep conversations with Dr. Paradise, and was looking for a way to get along with his brother again. 1 year and 9 months have gone by since they started the program. Justin's been approved for weight loss surgery, but Steven's not allowed to go near him during it. Luckily, the procedure was a success, and Steven was eventually allowed to visit his brother again, whether Justin liked it or not. When they both met, Steven gave Justin some pointers, making for a pretty wholesome interaction. However, Justin wasn't exactly willing to forgive Steven for the years of abuse, and it would only be a matter of time before this moment of peace was once again severed, this time permanently. During a second visit, Steven stole a bottle of painkillers from Justin. When confronted over the phone, he let out a barrage of abuses. As it would turn out, their own father was the one who gave Justin's pills to Steven. Instead of acknowledging how abhorrent this was, Steven Sr. yelled at Justin for not helping his brother get over his addiction. How can someone be this fucking clueless? The enabling persisted, and a month later, their dad was still trying his damnedest to make the two like each other. Their car ride to Dr. Now's was miserable, and the father was not making things easier. In tears, tears, Justin began listing down the monumental amounts of abuse he was put through. Steven punched him every day, slammed his hand into a door, shoved him around aggressively, and even made him lose a car. In turn, Steven sarcastically mentioned how Justin stabbed him in the hand once. It was a shit show, and Justin was ready to fly back to Houston and ditch the weight loss program entirely. Feeling tricked by his dad, Justin decided to stay outside in the car. Dr. Now gave Steven Sr. a very stern warning about enabling someone's behavior, and as if all of that wasn't bad enough, Steven gained about 34 pounds. The doctor decides to run some drug tests on Steven and states that if any of them come out positive, he is out of the program. Even if he's perfectly clean though, he still has to lose 75 pounds within the next 2 months. Meanwhile, Justin got a cab to the hotel and started packing his stuff. He was steaming with rage so badly that his dad got him a puppy to calm him down. Steven offered to leave Houston himself to let his brother stay in the program, but Justin still refused. There is absolutely nothing that can be done to fix their relationship. Left to wallow alone in his apartment, Steven was sad to see his family go. He called his brother a big baby and proceeded to shave his head again. Justin, meanwhile, has been thriving now that Steven is finally out of his life. Steven goes to Dr. Now for his next appointment. Since his test results came out negative, he is allowed to stay in the program. Also, by this point, he's long since stopped caring about Justin. The weigh-in showed how Steven lost only 4 pounds over the month. He was still gorging down pizzas, but at least he was keeping up with his exercise. During their talk, Dr. Now was demonic enough to mention how Steven's lack of hygiene made 2 of his patients nearly puke. He had a severe skin infection that he desperately needed to keep clean. So Dr. Now implored Steven to start taking showers, and that if he didn't start losing more weight, things were only going to get worse. A month goes by, and Steven Sr. comes down to Houston to help his son buy groceries. At first, he was scared of being seen by other people, but he pulled through and went in. Even though this was a very simple task, Steven's father was proud of him for going out in public. But things did get weird when Steven blocked an entire aisle to take a selfie. Knowing that Justin was living his best life, Steven ranted about how his brother was jealous that his dad didn't give him attention, continuing to show just how immature he is. Eventually though, Steven's dad would have to head back home, when Justin fell unconscious back in Rhode Island. Upon hearing the news, Steven decided to lock himself inside his apartment and make his dad sit outside. He claimed it was nothing more than a ploy to get Steven Sr. to come back, and called out his father for enabling Justin. You know, the guy who stole Justin's meds? Thankfully, the infinitely more sympathetic brother recovered and continued to improve his life. But Steven? He would test positive for opiates yet again and get kicked out of Dr. Now's program once and for all. Holed up in his apartment, Steven continued to spiral and believed he was better than ever. Now having a girlfriend, he decided to leave Houston behind and move to Iowa with her. Yes, you heard that right. This man has gotten more love than you and me combined. She is a massage therapist, and apparently she has a 13-year-old daughter too. I can say the ages now! This man can't even take care of a cat, and now he's taking care of a child. Despite no longer being in the program, Steven mentioned he'd still try to keep up with his diet. Now replacing food with physical intimacy, Steven remarked how his family felt immense envy, calling his girlfriend a prostitute and porn star. Believe it or not, the couple would actually tie the knot a month later. Neither his father nor his brother were invited to the wedding though. Steven tried to reach out to Justin, but he blocked him and his new family everywhere on social media. 2 years after Steven was removed from the program, Dr. Now randomly received a message from him. Despite all the time he had to make a change, his weight has not gone down at all. He mentioned how his leg had been swelling for a while now, how he was a bit more active than he was in Houston, and that his stomach was in constant pain. Dr. Now then asked about his diet, and Steven shared how he was still consuming 4 or 5 pizzas a day. On most occasions, he'd be eating every 2 hours he was awake. Steven also said his wife was on the brink of divorcing him, since she tried to get him to improve but he never listened. He caused arguments left and right, and refused to eat her homemade meals. By his own admission, he was a very manipulative person. This phone call was a desperate attempt to get back into the weight loss program before he turned 40, but Dr. Now was not gonna fall for it again, and that was every single Assanti Brothers episode of My 600 Pound Life. Following the release of this saga, Steven and Justin both became famous, and would be interviewed multiple different times. During an AMA, Justin gave the My 600 Pound Life subreddit a unique look into him and his family's lives. He mentioned how his father's now an Uber driver trying to make ends meet. In that thread, he also shared that Steven's leg glows under a backlight, showing just how much he's ruined his body. His self-destructive lifestyle led many to believe he died in 2022, so Justin reactivated his Reddit account after years of silence and let everyone know his brother was still alive. Over the years, Steven's hygiene only got worse. Not only was he pulling his hair out, he started losing teeth as well. Viewers were concerned about his well-being. The only glimpses they had into his life were through his cameo videos. In 2024, Steven shared on Instagram that he crossed 1,000 pounds, but somehow clawed his way back to 750. Lastly, around 2025, Steven started devoting himself to Jesus. His day-to-day life has devolved into posting images of himself in the metaverse. His TikTok account is now closed, and his main source of income is Cameo. The last image people saw of Steven was one where he had lost all of his teeth. His gums look like they've hardened over time to let him keep eating food. I don't know how this man is still alive.